Welcome back to the program. So first and foremost, I want to thank each and every one of you for the warm wishes, of course, and the condolences and the prayers. I really, truly appreciate that. It's been tough, but hopefully, things will work out okay. But wanted to kind of start back with a bang. I wanted to come back strong, so I think we have a good show for everyone to digest here today. So first thing, let's start with the Epstein situation. So it looks like the Wall Street Journal is trying to do another hit piece against President Trump, and they are saying that back in May, Attorney General Pam Bondi met with President Trump and told him that your name is in the Epstein files. So of course the left is going to run with that as some type of admission of guilt or cover up or whatever it may be. But the reality is there are hundreds of names, more than likely, in the Epstein files. This does not implicate President Trump in any way. It does not mean that he's covering something up, and it certainly doesn't mean that he's guilty of anything nefarious either. I think it's just a sad attempt, honestly, to change the subject, to change the narrative, to change the focus, if you will, away from the largest scandal in American history, which of course starts at the top. I think that's what that's more about. But it is interesting that on August 11th, in a couple of short weeks here, that Ghislaine Maxwell will be doing a deposition in front of the House. And at that point, she is supposed to divulge what she knows. What's interesting about that is on July 12th, I put out a post on X that said, here's my question. Why didn't Ghislaine Maxwell talk and reveal the Epstein list when she was going through her trial? Certainly, she would have gotten a reduced sentence, more than likely, or maybe no jail time at all. But I think that she was still going to go to jail, but she would have been able to negotiate less time. And I said this about a month ago. Why doesn't she testify and tell us all the names in the Epstein list? Well, lo and behold, here we are. And August 11th, she's supposed to testify. Now, is she going to divulge all of the names? Gosh, I hope so. But I don't think she will. I think she might divulge some of the names that we already know. But I'm not sure the focus, if you will, and the overall reach of what her testimony to Congress is supposed to be. I know that they have voted to release the Epstein list, and we'll see what happens with that. But I think in reality, she holds the key. Let's face it. She was at his side for all those years. She was procuring all of these underage girls for him. So if anyone knows who's on the list, or if anyone knows who should be implicated in some type of pedophilia ring or operation, it certainly would be Ghislaine. So we'll have to see what happens with that. Now, next, let's move on to this. So there could be yet another scandal brewing, not necessarily in a bad way for Republicans or the Trump administration, but more importantly, another type of Russia hoax, or who knows, how many other scandals they've had from, of course, the auto pen and Biden gate and all these other crazy things. Now they are trying to go after Pete Hegseth. They're trying to force him out. So there was a group of military officers and a civilian at the Pentagon that were plotting to try to oust Pete Hegseth as the Secretary of Defense. This is a report from the Daily Mail. They reported Wednesday on a plot by a group of military officers and civilian Pentagon officials to force Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth out of his office through a public pressure campaign based on a letter signed by Pentagon insiders. Citing the usual deep state concerns about Hegseth's leadership, priorities, and performance, 3 of the coup plotters spoke on condition of anonymity on the background to the Daily Mail about the scheme and the letter. 3 Pentagon officials, 2 military and 1 civilian, each with at least 20 years in the department, which means they are deep staters, obviously, spoke on the condition of anonymity. The 3 Pentagon officials that they spoke to told us that a small group of their colleagues, including officers from a military branch, except for the Coast Guard, so all the officers are from the military branches other than the Coast Guard, and some civilian workers met at a private home in May to discuss and strategize how to get the word out about what they view as Hegseth's incompetence. They agree that the message would be stronger coming from current rather than retired Department of Defense personnel. Attendees jointly decided to give themselves a few months to agree on the exact wording of a joint letter. So this is almost like the 52 agents and the laptop from hell with the first drug addict, the first crackhead, as Tom Homan said the other day. And so they were going to run this story. Now, this is not your same old Trump administration that allows things to fester, that believes the wrong people, that believes cabinet members that then quietly stab him in the back as soon as he turns around. This is a different breed. This is President Trump in a supposedly third term, really understanding Washington, knowing where the snakes and the serpents lie, and making sure that he finds them and removes them. That's what's happening here. This is a whistleblower coming forward about another coup to take out Pete Hegseth, okay? And it just so happens to be, perhaps it's one of those little coinky-dinks, I guess you could call it, right? That there's now another report out saying that there was indeed classified information leaked and war plans leaked during the Signal chat. Now, we already know that that's garbage, and that didn't happen. But yet, it doesn't matter. Leak it, throw it out there, see what sticks, right? This is not your same defense secretary. This is not your same Trump administration from the first term. They are finding these people, and they're weeding them out. So there's yet another investigation that Pam Bondi and Kash Patel could potentially look at. But I would call that extremely low-hanging fruit. Let's concentrate where the crimes really are, which is on the Barack Obama administration throughout all those years, setting up fake intelligence and trying to entrap and interfere with President Trump's presidency. And that is going to be very interesting. Now, let's talk about this real quick, okay? A lot of people on the left are saying, well, he has immunity, and he didn't really do anything wrong here, and he was saving us from democracy, all this other garbage, right? Of course. But let's not forget who he is. Who is Barack Hussein Soetoro Marshall Davis Obama? We know him as a street thug. We know him as a hardcore Islamist and a communist. We know that he palled around with communists, as Sarah Palin once famously said. William Ayers from the Weather Underground, blowing up state buildings, right? You had Reverend Jeremiah Wright and his church of GD America. You had Tony Resco, the scumbag, low-life landlord guy who did all kinds of corrupt things. You had Father Flager. I mean, the list is endless of the amount of nefarious people that propped up Barack Obama and this, quote, change we can believe in, this hope and change, new candidate, the Manchurian candidate, right? This was what we were sold. But the bottom line is, he's always been a street thug. He learned on the streets of Chicago, and let's not forget that. All right? His DNA is all over this. And the thing is that this is irrefutable evidence. You have a former Democrat turned Republican director of national intelligence going after a former Democrat president. Trust me, folks, there's evidence. Okay? You're not going to see that scenario unfold anywhere else but right now. So, he's the orchestrator. He is the puppeteer of all of it. Okay? A closer look at Barack Obama's political rise in Chicago and his governing style in particular in Washington, suggests that it is far from implausible and very likely that he did everything that he's being accused of. And we know he did. While the mainstream media, I like to call them prostitutes, of course, has long celebrated Obama for his eloquence, his historic symbolism, and aspirational rhetoric about, quote, hope and change, his career tells a completely different story. Beneath the polished image of the Manchurian candidate lies a consistent pattern of ruthless behavior, tactics, and deceptive narratives straight from the Chicago Machine playbook. The Chicago way, as it is referred to, is a hardball and often corrupt style of political operation that uses brute force, that uses patronage, and intimidation tactics to gain and maintain power. Retaliation against enemies was the norm in Chicago, as political opponents were often targeted using legal, bureaucratic, or personal means to silence or discredit all of their adversaries. Obama's first foray into politics foreshadowed this approach. In his 1996 Illinois State Senate race, rather than winning through debate and democracy, Obama used legal technicalities to challenge the petition signatures of his opponents, including incumbent Alice Palmer, knocking them all off the ballot for an easy Obama victory. A similar pattern emerged in Obama's 2004 U.S. Senate race. In both the primary and the general elections, damaging private divorce records of his opponent were made public that all but eliminated his opposition. Though he denied involvement, his campaign strategist David Axelrod, a former journalist who had previously worked for one of the candidates, was widely suspected of orchestrating these leaks. Obama's rise in Chicago was also bolstered by alliances and unsavory characters. Real estate developer Tony Rezko funded all of Obama's campaigns and was later convicted of fraud and corruption. Rezko also helped Obama purchase his Hyde Park estate mansion in a shady real estate deal that conveniently gave Rezko cash for his legal fees and Obama a better price and a larger lot. As president, Obama weaponized federal agencies to target his political opponents and protect his allies. The 2013 IRS scandal revealed that conservatives and Tea Party candidates and people aligned with those types of groups and politicians faced endless delays in receiving tax-exempt statuses and disproportionately were audited. Obama famously dismissed the controversy by claiming there wasn't a, quote, smidge of corruption. Other scandals further underscored Obama's corrupt practices. The botched Fast and Furious gun-running operation and the Obama administration's deceptive handling of the Benghazi attacks demonstrated a habitual reliance on misinformation and cover-ups. Obama's false assurance about the Affordable Care Act, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor, was one of his biggest lies, became one of the most notorious broken promises in modern politics. In an October 25th, 2010 Univision interview, Obama said bluntly, quote, "We are going to punish our enemies and reward our friends who stand with us," end quote. During Obama's presidency, his administration secretly obtained the phone records of the Associated Press reporters and labeled Fox News journalist James Rosen a criminal co-conspirator to legally obtain his personal communications. Civil libertarians were further disillusioned by the massive expansion of NSA surveillance programs under Obama's watch, despite earlier promises to roll them back. Remember what he said: "We need a civilian force, a civilian military just as powerful as our U.S. military. I come to you today with hope and change to fundamentally transform America." And the sheep went, yay, yay, transform America. So stupid. Racial politics also became a very divisive tool used under Obama's leadership. Though he had marketed himself as a, quote, racial healer, Obama's comments after incidents involving Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown were designed to inflame tensions and reinforce grievances and a narrative to help solidify his voting base, rather than promote unity. You know, before I wrote Preserving Liberty, back in 2014, I wrote what was not Preserving Liberty, but was going to be something else that I never did anything with, and I called it The Great Squanderer, how Barack Obama squandered his presidency through race baiting, is what I was going to do, and I was going to write a whole thing about it, but it was 10 years, and I just didn't do it. I was working on other things, whatever, but I've always seen him as a race baiter, always. A revisit of Obama's radical ideological roots also deserves attention. In his best-selling memoir, Dreams from My Father, Obama recounts being mentored in his childhood by Frank Marshall Davis. By the way, Communist Party ID number 47455. A known member of the Communist Party USA and a pro-Soviet columnist. Davis was also the spitting image of Barack Obama, while Obama looked nothing like the, quote, Kenyan student whom he claimed was his biological father. Then there's, of course, Reverend Jeremiah G.D. America Wright, Obama's longtime pastor, infamous for sermons proclaiming G.D. America. Obama also maintained his deep ties with Bill Ayers, a former domestic terrorist from the Weather Underground, who was a close friend and ideological influence over Barack Obama and likely the ghostwriter of Obama's memoirs. Obama served on boards with William Ayers and even endorsed his book. To his supporters, Barack Obama remains a dignified and transformative figure. However, revisiting history reveals that Barack Obama is a well-executed Chicago way thug and con man. Obama campaigned on mainstream ideas as a unifier, as a, quote, reformer, but then governed like the Chicago machine politician that he actually was. There's no reason to think that he is not behind everything that President Trump had to endure the past 8 to 10 years. And I hope to God that he ends up in prison for the rest of his life. Now, let's move on to this. Okay. So, they are taking this very seriously, okay? Very seriously. As a matter of fact, the Department of Justice just announced today that they are launching an even bigger strike force to investigate Barack Obama's Russiagate hoax, as Gabbard says Barack Obama himself is implicated, is guilty, and is at the top of the pyramid. Okay? Now, what does this mean in particular? Well, it means two things. Number one, it means this. It means they're going to allocate quite a bit of financial resources to this. The second thing it means is more manpower. Okay? That means they're going to hire more investigators and prosecutors, and this thing is going to grow from its current 6 people to probably somewhere north of 40 to maybe 50 people. Okay? Barack is going to go down. I truly believe that. Unless there's just a complete two-tier justice system, and she risks, and Gabbard risked her entire life, because let's face it, she now has a huge target probably on her for doing this. Do you really think she'd risk her life if it wasn't true? It is true. Now we have to make sure that the Department of Justice and Kash Patel and the rest of these people do their job, investigate, prosecute, indict, all that, and imprison. How many times do you guys remember pre-2020 when I was on YouTube? I mean, how many times was I talking about all of this stuff? And I was giving you all the information. And I was telling you they are all guilty. But the head of the snake is Barack Obama. And I said they ought to be swinging from ropes. I said we ought to roll out old Sparky, right? And get it ready to go. I was attacked as a right-wing rabid criminal. That I was this conspiracy theorist. That, oh my God, this Bernstein character is saying that all these people should be held accountable, imprisoned for life, or executed. Well, hello, vindication is here. We are all vindicated. Everyone that's watched this show throughout all these years of every single deep state show that I've done. And sadly, I can't throw them back up to show you all. Why? Well, because when I was completely ghosted from the internet, I never had a chance or an opportunity to get to those files to save them. So sadly, unless people out there are watching and they've recorded them, they are unfortunately lost. But you know what's not lost? In my opinion, and it may take a long time, justice. I think justice is coming. Why on earth would they still be going back to all of this? Remember, there was a report, many reports, multiple reports that said, yeah, they lied, it was a bad deal, and the Republicans, signed off on it. The Rhino said, it's old news, forget about it, let's move on. Absolutely not. You cannot move on from a criminal conspiracy to overthrow the will of the voters of the United States of America and our constitutional republic. People need to be perp walked. They need to go to jail or worse for this. This can never happen again. I'm not the first to say that. Of course, Tulsi Gabbard said that today. So many people have said the same thing. We've got to hold these people accountable. This can never happen again. Okay, now is your opportunity to prove that there is no longer a multiple tier justice system. Get to work, guys. And let's start seeing some heads roll. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Put them down in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one.